Thank you firstly. Thank you so much, everyone. I was here in the morning as well, and I just want to say thank you so much for being with us for our last session at Delivery Hall today, and hope you're having fun. I am Rasee, I head up membership and growth at Innovate Finance. And I have to say that was very positive music for our conversation, actually, because we're literally talking about on the front line, how do you scale during a crisis? And I think this does bring IFGS to a great end, because we're going to have some very honest and transparent conversations from the guys who are doing it, have done it, and hopefully we can take away some positive feedback as well. So again, I have a stellar panel with me today. I have James, who is the co-founder and head of UK PrimaryBid, Richard, who is the chief evangelist and co-founder at Currencycloud, Olya, who's the head of growth and co-founder at Manigo, and Andrew, who's the co-founder and CEO at Incuto. So my first question to you guys is, what does scaling really mean to you? And because you've seen this as a journey as an entrepreneur, how has it really evolved? And Olya, I'm going to look at you because we were having a chat in the audience and you had some thoughts.
Hello everyone. Very happy to be here. Scaling and funding go hand in hand. And we've all just seen first quarter results on funding come out. It's not a very pretty picture. We are, to be exact, we're to 80% down compared to where we were last year on fintech funding specifically. So it's not pretty at all. When you look at this, companies like Revolut, TransferWise, Monzo, they were all scaling at the time when you could buy growth. From 2012 to 2021, the funding for fintechs went up eightfold to $344 billion. That's an astronomical number. We are in a very different environment today. And the era of easy money, I think, is gone, at least for now. So I firmly believe that the new name of the game is unit economics. Which means that we need to look at profitability on transactional level and make sure that our business models are sustainable. Those cash bleeding business models are they're no longer going to survive, and we've just seen that with an exit, with a very loud exit in the payment space of a big player, right, just recently. So to tie it back in, I think the scale. Well, another factor that we can look at is interest rates that are going up, and so the cost of capital has gone up significantly, and that puts even more pressure on startups and fintechs to deliver that high hurdle rate to attract investors' cash, because otherwise they're looking at money markets, at fixed income, and taking this sit and wait approach. And so, yes, today we are in a very different environment than we were in the last decade for scaling, because of availability of funding and because of shift of focus to profitability and the bottom line. I think markets are screaming for sustainable and responsible growth.
So that's a very honest answer. And Andrew, I want to bring you into the conversation as well, since you are in the scaling journey. How has it evolved for you as an entrepreneur?
So I'm Andrew Rabbitt. So our business is focused on supporting and providing critical infrastructure for community banks and credit unions. And most people have never heard of a credit union in the UK. They're massive in the US, but they're kind of small scale community-focused lenders who've been around since the 60s, and yet have seen this kind of peaks and troughs of people like Wonga emerging into the marketplace and other challenger lenders who come and go. These guys have been around for decades, but our job is to help them scale. And so our business has always been about scale, and I could not agree more about the unit economics argument. One of the biggest challenges for the people that we operate with is the unit economics of delivering a loan. So we've always been focused on that. In fact, we made it our business model. So we're transactional to the point where we've reduced the unit economics, the cost of delivering a loan to those lenders, and therefore made that our model so that when our lenders scale, we scale. We started this model 6 years ago, no line of sight to a cost of living crisis, but the lenders are now more needed than ever, and in fact it's them that are scaling. That's driving our growth. The interesting dynamic for us is that having taken investment from the VC market, their definition of growth is very different. And for us, it was so different that, in fact, last summer we just said, forget it. We're so misaligned in our definitions of what success looks like that we're just not going to take any more, because the expectation of how we would grow and what growth looked like was way too Monzo-like and way less sensible. We're still going to be here in 5 years like. And so we just took that decision to say, we're not going to enter into that game anymore. And so it's a really interesting market for us because our scale and our customer scale are completely synonymous. So we've always been on that scaling journey. But as a business, we recognize that the funding market out there has an incredibly different version of what scale looks like.
And James and Richard, what is your point of view, since you guys have been, here for a long time within the fintech,
Relative, I think that makes sense.
Yes, relatively too, yes.
I'll go first, only because if I think back, through crisis and from before, we've gone from less than 10 people, we were 7 people 3 years ago, to 150 odd today, which felt very daunting in terms of that scaling process.
Of course.
The reality is actually we've consolidated the last 6 months, we've stayed pretty much steady headcount-wise, and what that allows you is to reflect on the fact we're still tiny. So what felt very big suddenly is when you reflect on the opportunity and the fact we're still in the foothills of where we think we can get to, we're still a pretty small business with growing pains, because north of 100 people up to 150 and beyond requires structure and process that was not there before. It takes a lot of the charm away. So scaling is great, it's exciting, but as I say, in some ways it's a lot less fun. But I think it's appropriate for me to now hand on to Richard, because of course he started where, 2-3 years ago, you were where we are today, I think.
Yeah,
I guess
Currencycloud.
Yeah, Currencycloud. So we went from 400 people, say 3 years ago, to 30,000 people today, having been acquired by Visa in 2021. So, but when we set the business up, actually in we need a wheel for which crisis, because we set it up at the end of 2008, so the back end of the last financial crisis. And actually our customers, much like Andrew, our customers, we're one step removed from the end customer. So we service banks, fintechs, FX companies. And to Ola's point, actually our bread and butter were the people who bought this growth over the glory years of fintech. The Monzos, the Revoluts, the Starling Banks of the world are our kind of bread and butter customers. I think scaling for me still means how we deliver the very best service to the end customer. It's just the distribution of that might change. So the funding environment has changed for early stage fintechs, but that just means that some of the legacy organizations now are kind of stepping up their game, and how can we enable those businesses to deliver cost-effective, transparent, easily accessible cross-border payments to the end user.
I love that you still have customer at the heart of it all.
I think you have to.
Which is very important.
I think in any crisis, you have to be obsessive over your customer. Although, crisis aside, I think good businesses are obsessive over their customers anyway.
Yeah.
It's just an economic crisis probably laser focuses everybody.
But we spoke about the funding environment, and of course, it is getting tougher. I'm still very positive. We're at Innovate Finance. We encourage that partnership. But are you guys really feeling it in terms of, the cost of living crisis as well? Has it impacted your business and your scaling in any way?
Who's that, me first? Okay.
Go on.
I would say for us, obviously, fortunately, we had an acquisition at the end of 2021 by Visa, so perhaps the effect on our business hasn't been felt as much as it would have done pre-acquisition, but actually the effect has been on our customers. That's kind of where, as I said, a couple of years ago, you come in every week and there'll be a whole raft of applications for new early stage kind of VC-backed kind of startups in the wonderful world of fintech, whatever that might mean, who were, to Ola's point, had these business plans that were based on buying growth, and that just doesn't really exist anymore.
So have you pivoted any of your products and services accordingly? Or
good question.
to your customers?
I think rather than products and services, we've kind of laser focused on the segments that we go after.
Okay.
That's not to say that we don't service the existing customers that were there, but I think we've had to just have a look at actually who are we now building for? Where 2-3 years ago, were we going to build for the next wealth tech, lend tech application that was coming out? Actually, because all these people are still trying to do the same thing, they're going after the same customer.
Yeah.
So you and I on the retail space, it's small businesses, medium businesses that are underserved, in the UK and across the world. So I think it's less products and services, it's probably more customer segments. And there might be nuances to the product and service that you have if you're aiming over here rather than over here.
It's asking different questions as well, right,
Yeah,
as you're scaling as a business. And Andrew, how about you? Since you work with credit unions, of course, and that's very, very important work that they do. How has that impacted the cost of living crisis?
I have a controversial view on this one. Sorry.
We like controversies on stage.
It kind of annoys me, right, when we talk about the cost of living crisis, because the reality is that for decades, cost of living has been an issue for a whole tranche of people in society. It became a crisis when a bunch of people who were used to just picking up the phone to Barclays and saying, can I have a loan, one day got told no, and yet nothing about them had changed except the appetite of the lender. Sorry, not calling out Barclays, that's really rude, isn't it? Other banks are available. That you pick up to a mainstream lender and suddenly you get a no. And so what's actually changing in the market is the appetite of the lenders, and of course over the last sort of 10 years a bunch of fintech lenders have emerged who have, as quickly as they arrived, also left and recognized that the really cool models that they had running underneath don't work anymore in this environment. And so the lending environment is squeezed to the point where even when you go ask the meerkats where to go next, you don't get a yes. And so one of the things that we've had to do to pivot our business is to make sure that we've accelerated the infrastructure. Because the lenders that we have capital, they're just not easily reachable. So we've had to make sure that but we came here to fix that problem 6 years ago for the people who already existed in that crisis, who were going to Wonga 6 years ago or 7 years ago. All that's happening now is there's a new group of consumers who are in the middle of that, the near prime kind of consumers as everybody refers to them, who suddenly are getting a no when they got a yes, and they now need to know where to go next. So our cost of living crisis already existed, it's just accelerating, which is accelerating our scale, which is a whole different set of challenges, but
but financial education is a big part of it as well, right? And James, how about you, since you guys are within the lending space?
Or helping companies raise capital. So PrimaryBid is a technology solution that allows individual investors to participate in public company fundraisings on the same terms as the big institutions. Careful what one wishes for, but we're a business that thrives in adversity, because when companies need to raise capital in the public markets that should be readily available, we're in a bit of a hiatus at the moment with a lack of direction generally, and that's something I'm sure we'll talk about. From a PrimaryBid point of view, we were lucky enough to put money in the bank at the end of 2021, early 22. I say lucky because actually, of course, from February 22 onwards, we've been in a changing world, and so we've been very prudent with our own capital. We're funded for many years, assuming no revenue, so that's comfortable in some respects, but deeply uncomfortable in other ways. I go back to my prior point that the lights will come on, we'll see industry functioning normally at some point, hopefully not too far from now. I think it's a really exciting time because it's in periods of adversity that true businesses succeed, and if you can get your head down and hold position and move forward, take share and progress now, then that bodes very well for when the sun comes out.
I love the positive attitude. But have your spendings and outgoings changed?
They have not, in so much as a business, kind of to Richard's point, a big believer in being customer-led. And so we listen to where issuers, where the industry that's around us is taking us geographically and by product and so on. And I think what we have stopped doing is throwing any ideas or capital at the wall for the sake of growth where you don't see enough conviction. And that again, that's a lesson for every business today, I think.
And Olya, bringing you in as well, what are you guys doing at Manigo differently? And how, you spoke a lot about the funding environment, but how has the cost of living crisis impacted you guys?
Yes, similar to what my colleagues have mentioned, it's with every crisis, just as tell me your name again, James. As James just mentioned, that the fittest survive, right? So the beauty about the crisis is that it refocuses you sharply. It makes you think really hard and really critically about, are you optimizing on every level? So that's what we had to do as well. I like the challenge. So we've looked and we've also stretched every dollar, as far as we could, and we've been very prudent with the capital. But we are taking it further as well. We had to sit down and think about, are we optimizing? Are we doing everything we can in these current conditions, and maybe shall we alter our strategy, and even as far as the product? And so we've decided to do it on 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
So first, we looked at our platform resilience. To give a little bit of context, for those who don't know, Manigo is a banking as a service provider and fintech infrastructure provider as well. For those who are not familiar with terminology, we think of it as a matchmaker between any company and any fintech use case. We are the glue that brings everything together and enables companies to offer modern financial products and services under their brand. It can be cards, accounts, FX, crypto, BNPL, take it further. There's no end to what we can add on the verticals. So what we've done, we looked at our platform resilience. Number one, we thought, is it resilient enough in the current environment? Looking at the past few years, we've had so many regulatory changes, and it changes the landscape dramatically. And the vendors, people like Currencycloud, the vendors, they change the risk appetite, they potentially change the geographical coverage changes. Also, each vendor has its strengths and weaknesses. No matter how good we all are, everyone knows what the weaknesses are, and there is no perfect vendor out there right now. Although there are some that come very close. And I'm sure Visa's done fantastic due diligence. And so we have some heavy weight people on the stage. But so taking a look at all of that, we've realized it's not enough to just be connected to one banking service partner, to just one issuing processor, etc. And we see the future of banking as a service in infrastructure, in robust infrastructure connections. That's where we see the future. Right. And that's why we're building in multi-plugs for every vendor vertical. So that's what we've done. So that was one thing. And then the second thing we looked at is we thought, where is growth today? We need to take advantage of those areas. So we're looking at BNPL that's growing. A lot of younger generation prefer BNPL to credit cards, so we're adding that vertical. Crypto is here to stay. It's slowly coming back. We're adding that as well. And the third thing that we looked at is, are we commercializing fully the amazing asset that we've built?
Sure.
And we decided to diversify and optimize the product. So we've been doing for a while, you would be familiar, Richard, the program management term, right? We've been doing this fully serviced solution, turnkey banking as a service for a while. And we realized that we also have this amazing tech, the core banking infrastructure, core banking software that we have that helps clients manage their customers' transactions, manage risk, compliance. It gives the broad overview of everything they have on the platform and allows them to put controls in place, etc. So this is very powerful, and this is what lots of players out there need, miss, and want. And we've decided to extend our platform on a software as a service offering. So we've just diversified. It's a long answer. Sorry.
That's fine. But I like the fact that you said, you guys thrive under pressure and you like challenges, otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? You all are innovators at the end of the day. But Andrew, and this one's for all of you, but I'm gonna start with you. What are your plans for next year, and do you plan to continue scaling or pause for thought? It's almost like what Olya said. You focus on where the growth is. Are you doing that, or you're pausing and seeing how it goes?
We're definitely not pausing. I'm not sure that's really an option in our world because the market's driving itself. But no, I think I agree with everything you just said, but very specifically some of those things that around the way we have to focus in on the commercialization of the products and everything else, because I suppose to an extent, one of our one of our opportunities here is that we can allow ourselves to grow at the pace of the market, and that's going really fast,
Of course.
which is great, but we don't want to break in the meantime.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, we always refer to ourselves as critical infrastructure as well around the particular market, purely because we've got a group of subscale lenders who are now able to operate faster and at a greater scale than they would do if we weren't there. Okay. And so I think for us, we take a great deal of comfort in the idea that this market isn't going away, it's actually accelerating, which is great, but we also take very seriously the idea that we have to focus on our resilience, our sustainability alongside that, and make sure that we're fit for purpose for that market. To the extent that the PRA recently sort of told the lenders that we work with, they gave them an edict around their management of third-party risk. And so we've actually put in place a series of conversations with our own customers to bring them onto calls to say, let us tell you about us, because we're the only ones there, so it's not like you have that much of a choice really about where you go, so let's at least have that conversation. So I think the next 12 months for us is around making sure that we optimize that scale, make sure that we've got the maximum return from the customers that we've got, grow alongside them, make sure that we're operationally resilient, we're sustainable as well. We actually had a team day the other day where, very entertaining, we put on the wall a picture and explained to the team that the products that we're building now are products that we had on that same picture 6 years ago. Oh. They're exactly the same products. We're just still building. So we're not just going to randomly react. We came here on purpose with a particular sector, but we knew its dynamics. It didn't have a lot of money. We had a business model. None of that's changed. It's just going faster. We just got to make sure we can keep up with it. So.
I think that's the best part about being a fintech, right, is that you're so agile. And I think, Richard, you may have a different conversation right now because of your partnerships with Visa. But James, I want to bring you in. And are you guys, just like Andrew, going for it, scaling or pausing?
To say that we're trying to be doing everything everywhere all at once would be a reflection of a world past. I think a couple of things to say. Firstly, as a technology-led business, you're forever having to try and catch up with your own technology debt, and that's never ending. And it's no small task, keeps me awake at night. That said, we're lucky as a business. We operate in a regulated marketplace, work very closely with the regulator, with Treasury in the UK, and with the industry, with banks, with law firms and so on, and with companies that want to raise capital. That gives us great direction of where we need to go and the products we need to provide, and they're forever changing. So today we're very much active in the equity markets with interest rates as they're changing. The debt markets are going to open up. We're driving that to offer retail bonds to individuals, which feels very worthy given where we used to be historically. Then taking that as best practice and exporting it to other geographies is very exciting. So we're live in the UK and 3 European countries, working very hard to launch in the US and potentially elsewhere. We're being sort of dragged towards the Middle East for good reason, because there's so much activity there right now.
And are you seeing a lot of activity happening internationally compared to the UK?
We are, and for our business, operating in capital markets, which are either open or closed to varying levels or degree, it's really interesting that geographically there's always a market that's functioning. And so it must be good practice as a business to be able to have different legs to the business in terms of that balance. And so that's where we're going. So geographically and by products, it's pretty easy, again, to be industry-led or customer-led, especially with regulatory tailwinds behind us.
Richard?
The question about the next 12 months, was it?
Yes. What are your plans for next year? Are you scaling? I mean, you guys are an international fintech.
Yeah, I guess, and we've had various iterations of scale over our kind of 14 years, and now is kind of just another phase of that. I think actually just reflecting on some of the stuff that's been said, and it's interesting when people start talking about focusing, making every dollar stretch in times of crisis. To any CFOs in the room, you'll be saying that's just standard practice, right? You should be doing that anyway. So I think the two things that I would add to what's been said, I'll reiterate the point around we will continue to obsess over our customer and to deliver the very best cross-border service we can to the end user in conjunction with our partners, whether that's through customers in new geographies, whether that's through customers in new segments. It's just doubling down on that customer obsession. I think the other thing that we haven't talked about is obsessing over our people and our talent. I think in times of a crisis, whether it's pandemic, whether it's economic crisis, it's giving your people clarity over the direction of what you're doing. Yeah. And we get this conversation all the time. And it's been a challenge as we've scaled. It's easier when you're 12 people all sat in one room, in a world that pre-pandemic, you're all sat there together 5 days a week. As your business scales, and I've known this through Currencycloud scaling and now being part of Visa, staying connected to your people, I think is one of the biggest things. There's certainly my role with my lofty title of Chief Evangelist, which you can ask me later what that means. I think a lot of that is internally taking our people, making sure we've got a healthy organization that's going to deliver on all the stuff we want to do for our customers.
But I love that because, as fintechs are scaling and keeping and retaining your talent, keeping them happy, finding new talent is a key thing that fintechs focus on.
Not just fintechs, but for the founders, co-founders here on the panel, I think it's our obligation as to our people, right? We've dragged them into this dream of ours, so we have a duty of care to make sure that we can help them pay their mortgages and their bills through a time of crisis, but also they get something out of this. And we spend far too long, in front of a desk, in front of a laptop in our lives. Yeah. You've got to enjoy what you do, and you've got to have clarity on actually joining a business that is doing something that's positive.
Absolutely love that. How about Olya? Are you guys scaling at Manigo?
We are. Pausing? We definitely are scaling at a sustainable pace.
I like
exactly.
Yeah.
But to add to what has been said, I very much, to build on Richard's point, obsessing over the customers. So for us in the kind of banking as a service infrastructure, fintech space, it is about tech. So obsessing over our tech in a way to solve big pain points for the customers. Yeah. Because let's face it, and I don't know, Richard, I think you might agree with me that tech has been an Achilles heel for fintechs for the last few years, even though it's gotten significantly better. No one's got it perfect. So it's kind of focusing on tech, solving those issues for clients, and then also what hasn't been talked about, I guess, in a current environment with all of the recent layoffs. The silver lining here is that there is an incredible talent pool out there.
There is.
And I remember trying to hire last year or the years before, and we always found it very difficult to find top people. And now it's a very different market. So if you were looking to expand the team, now is the time because there are lots of good people out there. And then another thing that I look at also in the times of economic downturn, I think it's very important to also think how can you create synergies. So I'm a firm believer in right partnerships, and we are exploring that path very diligently now and found lots of synergies with some of our vendors. Yeah. And we're making each other stronger. We are building, when we work together, we are delivering more efficient solution to the client and servicing them better in the end. And so, that's where the focus is. We're definitely scaling.
I was going to say, it's great to see that you all are scaling. Everybody talked about, customer focus, but since you mentioned talent, I could see, Andrew, you were smiling when it came a lot to talent. I know you have some thoughts with regards to that.
Hey, we if nobody's familiar with where this is, we're based in a town called Ilkley, which has 11,000 people. It has more sheep than people. And so we are one of 2 fintechs in Ilkley. I mean, can you imagine, right? And so attracting talent has always been a real challenge, and the last few years has just been ridiculous, right?
Yeah. Horrendous.
I was smiling mainly because the comment at the beginning was about bringing people. I can't remember the excitement, the term that was used in our business. I'm joined by my co-founder here today, who joined me 6 years ago in setting the business up, and joined full time in October last year, and was caught up in a kind of vortex of excitement. I'm like a puppy dog all the time about the topic that we're trying to fix. And so I think trying to infuse that enthusiasm into a wider team got more challenging over the last few years. I met for the first time last week 2 employees who I didn't interview. And that was like a break point for me. I'm sitting there going, hang on a minute, how did we get to the point where I didn't meet these guys first, right? And it's really, that for me is really exciting because we've got really interesting people coming into the business, but it isn't just me getting excited about the thing that we're talking about. Everyone in the business is kind of getting to that point of excitement about going, this is going somewhere, we're going to get, you know, this is going to be great. And I think attracting the right people now, you're right, the last year, write off, forget it. You couldn't get a CV over the door. And people were competing on all sorts of random things. They were putting things out where they would pay to redecorate your office or buy you a new monitor or whatever. You go, forget it. I think the big challenge now is retaining that talent because when you have a more dispersed workforce, keeping people in without getting attracted off into other spaces. I think we've got an interesting mix of people who are attracted to the idea of working for a fintech, but also attracted to our purpose. So we lead heavily on that purpose. It's very difficult to disconnect the two things in our business. And so we talk about that a lot. It's our kind of North Star for the whole thing. So you know, we get a lot of really good people who come and gravitate towards us. And not just because I'm now puppy dog excited, but because other people are joining me in that as well. So.
I mean, I work with a lot of our fintechs every day, and our founders and CEOs, they're so passionate about keeping their talent happy. It's really heartwarming for me to see as well on a personal level. And, you know, before I let you go, I do want to end us, you know, on a positive note. But if you did have a crystal ball that was given to you, what can you see in the next 6 to 12 months for the industry in terms of the crisis, but also how to come out of it? And hopefully, if you were to give your peers here a piece of advice that you could leave everybody with one thought, what would it be? Richard? I was going to look at James, but then...
No, James, go for it.
James.
Yeah.
Well, I'd ask everyone in the room to open a PrimaryBid account. That's very self-serving. I mean, we're in a really interesting time. The UK, in terms of ownership of equities, is lower than any geography in Europe and a fraction of the US or Asia and so on. And we've got the need to improve that culture. For saving purposes, pension reform and so on is upon us. So this is a self-serving answer to your question, but I think really exciting times, looking at the way the yield curve is changing. Very few people understand what a bond is, and yet risk profile and return profile sits so squarely at the top of the food chain of opportunity and the risk and reward. And so if we can play our hand in giving people access to retail bonds and making sensible investment decisions, that's very exciting. And I think the availability of information, the ability to trade for free and make the right decision is so apparent today. What catches me off guard every day and keeps me distracted is where data is taking us. We've latched on in some ways to the power of ChatGPT. It hit home when I asked one of my sons to write a thank you letter, and we did it through ChatGPT, which was very scary. It wasn't very authentic. I made him write it again. But to my mind, that is a really interesting realm, and that's where we've all got to be ahead of ourselves in terms of thinking about how our own businesses and the world around us is changing so fast.
Of course. Olya? I've passed on the crystal ball to you.
A crystal ball is a bit of a tricky question these days with the black swans we've had, 2 black swans that we've had in the last 3 years with the global pandemic and Russia getting into war, threatening to nuke half the world. So apart from the crystal ball, I think we're just going through another cycle. And we will come out of it just like we have in the past. If we speak specifically about, kind of our space and where we are and funding and valuations, what is to come in the next at least 12 months. So the valuations are down. We will see a lot of healthy M&A activity. We've already seen it start with Acorns acquiring Go Henry. And then I think Marqeta bought Boss Player, the Parafiyanovich. So there's that already happening, and we'll see more consolidation in the area. That was a bit, no, those valuations were great when Richard did that. Yeah. So valuations are down right now. I think it's affecting your business a lot, James, right? With the IPO market being frozen. Do you have a view on that? Like, I think that maybe towards the end of the year, we'll see it rebound because the pipeline of deals is growing, and if the Fed stops hiking, then hopefully we'll see some improvement there.
Well, we're going to see all buses come at once at some point, and whether that's end of this year or more likely next year, time will tell. I think public markets went through such an active period of refinancing. It's
13 years, yeah?
Well, but looking at sort of the 2021 period, post or during the health crisis, that I think it's really interesting that we are at a paused phase while we understand directionally where we're headed. One thing's for certain, I think we will get caught off guard, and I think it's coming sooner rather than later, just by nature of such an extended period of inactivity.
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah, but then just to finish my thought, I think it is important to remember that greatest fintechs can be born even in the times of crisis. If we look back, Venmo, Stripe, Square, they all came out, emerged from the ashes of 2008 global financial crisis.
Fintech actually came out of that as well,
yes.
right? Before that, nobody really knew what fintech was.
There was new finance back then. New finance, and then it became fintech. So, yeah.
And that's what I believe. I think we will see some really healthy fintechs scaling forward, and we will work hard for Manigo to be one of them.
I love that. Andrew?
Okay, I'll be quick. Crystal ball moment is hopefully everyone in the room will go get a credit union account as well if we're following James's.
He's an excuse. He's an ex-banker.
Yeah, that's right. Other banks are available, but they're definitely the right ones. I think the advice that we've learned I was going to say the hard way. It's not really fair to say the hard way. The advice that I would give anybody is if you have a point, stick to it. Don't let anybody distract you from having a purpose, and certainly don't let people tell you and redefine what growth looks like in a business. If you've come here to deliver on something, stick with it. Have the strength of conviction to make it happen. I'm really lucky. John and I, my co-founder and I, have repeatedly said that we think we've got the best jobs in fintech right now, most rewarding jobs in fintech, and that's because we stuck true to our purpose and said we were going to deliver it, and then we've stayed on that course. It's very easy to get distracted by people making big offers of writing checks and doing other things. We've never had any money, so not having any now doesn't really make a difference. We're sticking to what we're doing, and we're going to make it the best thing we can possibly do.
More power to you and your team, though.
Say again?
More power to you and your team. And the passion really comes across. So I think you guys are definitely doing something right.
Okay, so as an evangelist, I'm an eternal optimist anyway. As a father of 3 young children, I'm a realist. So it's going to be tough, right? So, but as Ola said, some of the biggest, best, most exciting businesses are born during tough times because you sharpen your focus and you kind of focus on what's really important. I think the advice that I would give, having, as I said, set up the business end of 2008, early 2009, kind of survived a few crises along the way. Now's the time, and I'll repeat it again, I'm a broken record, get closer to your customer than ever before, and get closer to your people than ever before. If you do that, I think you're going to be fine.
That's amazing. And you all are agile, innovative, businesses. I'm sure you'll all do great. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, can they reach out to you directly on LinkedIn, or how do we get in touch?
By all means.
Yeah?
Our names are there. So
By all means.
Amazing.
find us.
Yes, because it's a community, right? At the end of the day, we're here to support each other during these times. And, fintech was, like I said, born out of this, and we're here to support. Did you want to say
No,
something?
I was going to double down on that point, I think.
Yeah.
And I spent some time in the US as well. It's no different out there. The one thing that's amazing about fintech is it is very much an ecosystem and a community. And you have lots of frenemies, but then lots of frenemies. But I think everybody, if you peel it back, wants to do something for the end user.
Yeah, everyone.
And we're
is
end
here.
users of our services, right? So
we are.
most people in here will have some kind of Challenger Bank card or will now sign up for a PrimaryBid account. So we're helping ourselves at the end of the day. So.
It's like what you said about being customer-centric keep that focus on and be agile, and I think we'll get there. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to our audience. You've been great. Thank you, speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you.